Napoleon Bonaparte was a French military leader and emperor who rose to prominence during the French Revolution and its associated wars of the late 18th century. He is regarded as one of the greatest military commanders in history. His campaigns and warfare tactics are studied at military academies around the world, and his victories were often decisive and spectacular. But Napoleon's ambition led him to overextend his military forces, which ultimately resulted in his downfall. So today, let's take a look at his fascinating life story. But before we begin, let me ask you a question. How much do you know about Napoleon? Do you think he was a hero or a villain? Or maybe he was just a product of his times, a revolutionary who sought to overturn the old order and remake France in his own image? Well, whatever your opinion may be, there's no denying that Napoleon was an extraordinary man who lived an extraordinary life. He was born into a middle-class family in Corsica, a Mediterranean island that was recently acquired by France. From an early age, he showed signs of brilliance and ambition. At the age of 9, he published his first literary composition, a poem dedicated to the glory of Corsica. And at 16, he left home to study at a prestigious military academy in mainland France. It was there that he learned the skills of war and made the contacts that would help him rise through the ranks of the army. When the French Revolution erupted in 1789, Napoleon was caught up in the fervor for liberty, equality, and fraternity. He joined the revolutionaries and quickly made a name for himself as a capable administrator. In 1793, he was appointed as the second in command of an artillery regiment stationed in northern France. There he met the love of his life, Josephine de Beauharnais, who was the daughter of a wealthy landowner. They married in 1796 and had 2 children together, but their happiness was short-lived. Soon after, Napoleon was called to action as part of the French campaign in Italy. The campaign was a disaster for the French. They faced a coalition of European powers who wanted to restore the monarchy in France. Napoleon was given command of an army of 40,000 men, most of whom were inexperienced recruits. But against all odds, he won a series of brilliant victories that shocked the continent. He used innovative tactics such as concentrating his forces to break through enemy lines and then exploiting their weaknesses. He also displayed great courage on the battlefield, often leading from the front. His victories in Italy made him a national hero, and he was awarded the prestigious Légion d'honneur, the highest order of merit in France. But Napoleon's ambitions did not stop there. He wanted more power and more glory. And so when a coup d'etat was planned to overthrow the weak government of France, he was one of the leaders. The coup was successful and Napoleon became first consul, a title that gave him virtually absolute power in France. Now that he was in charge, he began to implement his vision for France. He reformed the legal system, established a new currency, and modernized the army. He also continued to pursue his foreign policy goals, which included expanding French territory and spreading the ideals of the French Revolution. One of Napoleon's most ambitious projects was the conquest of Egypt. He assembled a massive invasion force of 150,000 men and sailed with them to Egypt in 1798. The invasion was meant to be a surprise attack on British India, but it was leaked to the British and they were ready for the French. The result was a stalemate that lasted for 3 years. Napoleon decided to return to France in 1801, leaving General Menou to finish the campaign. But when Menou surrendered to the British in 1801, the Egyptian campaign was effectively over. It was a costly failure that had drained French resources and prestige. Despite the setback in Egypt, Napoleon's star was still on the rise. In 1802, he made peace with Britain and turned his attention to Austria, which had been allied with Britain against France. Napoleon wanted to end the war with Austria and secure his western flank. So he offered his sister Pauline as a bride to the Austrian Archduke. The marriage was a success, and Napoleon's reputation as a master of strategy and diplomacy was further enhanced. But Napoleon's desire for power and glory was not satiated. He soon found himself at war again, this time with the Holy Roman Empire. The conflict, known as the War of the Third Coalition, pitted Napoleon against a powerful alliance of European nations, including Austria, Russia, Sweden, and Britain. The French army was outnumbered and outgunned, but Napoleon's tactics and strategy were brilliant. He won a series of stunning victories that shattered the coalition and forced them to sue for peace. Napoleon's victories in the War of the Third Coalition made him the dominant power in Europe. He had defeated 3 of the 4 great powers of the old regime and established French hegemony over most of continental Europe. But his rivals were regrouping and preparing for a comeback. And so Napoleon went to war again, this time against Prussia and Saxony. The conflict, known as the War of the Fourth Coalition, was another resounding success for Napoleon. He defeated the Prussians and Saxons decisively and forced them to join the long list of his vanquished enemies. By now, Napoleon was at the peak of his power. He had conquered most of Europe and his name struck terror in the hearts of his enemies. But his conquests had also made him very rich. He had seized vast amounts of treasure and booty from his defeated opponents, and he used this wealth to build up France and enrich himself and his family. He lavished money on public works, the arts, and culture. He also created a new nobility based on merit and loyalty rather than birthright. He was creating a new France in his own image. However, some of his former allies were becoming uneasy with his dominance. The Spanish royal family, who had been restored to power by Napoleon, conspired with Britain to overthrow him. But Napoleon was onto them and he crushed the rebellion brutally. He seized control of Spain and installed his brother Joseph as king. This act of aggression outraged the Spanish people and the rest of Europe. In response, the Spanish people rose up against the French occupation. Napoleon sent more troops to restore order, but the situation only got worse. The Spanish guerrillas harassed the French troops and made their lives a misery. Napoleon was furious and he decided to punish the Spaniards by selling Louisiana to the United States. He hoped that this would drain the Spanish colonies of settlers and resources. But it didn't work. The Spanish resistance continued unabated. Meanwhile, the rest of Europe was seething with resentment towards Napoleon. The Russians were furious about the Spanish situation and the Austrians were eager for revenge. The British were also licking their wounds and waiting for their chance to strike back. All of Napoleon's rivals were now united in a new alliance known as the Sixth Coalition. They planned to invade France and end Napoleon's reign once and for all. And so began the disastrous campaign that would lead to Napoleon's downfall. He faced an invading force of over 100,000 men led by some of the most experienced generals in Europe. Despite being outnumbered, Napoleon's forces fought bravely and inflicted heavy casualties on the invaders. However, the sheer numbers of the coalition army eventually told and Napoleon was forced to retreat. As he retreated, he left behind his wife and son, who were captured by the Austrians. This was a bitter pill to swallow for Napoleon, who had always put his family first. He managed to escape to Paris where he rallied his supporters and prepared for a last stand. But when the coalition forces entered Paris, the city fell into chaos. People rioted in the streets, looted shops, and burned buildings. Napoleon knew that he could NT hold out forever, and so he fled to exile in the island of Elba off the coast of Italy. There he lived in luxury, receiving the homage of local officials and spending his time hunting and fishing. But his exile didn't last long. When the coalition forces tried to invade Elba and capture him, he escaped and returned to France. But his second attempt to regain power was even more humiliating than the first. His army was defeated at the Battle of Waterloo and he was forced to flee once again. This time he was captured and exiled to the remote island of St. Helena in the Indian Ocean. It was here that Napoleon spent his last years, writing his memoirs and reflecting on his life. He died in 1821 at the age of 51, having lived a life of adventure, glory, and tragedy. His story is a reminder of the dangers of unchecked ambition and the importance of knowing when to stop. And so ends the story of Napoleon, the little Corsican who conquered most of Europe and then lost everything. Do you think he was a hero or a villain? Or maybe he was just a product of his times, a revolutionary who sought to overturn the old order and remake France in his own image? Let me know what you think in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this video, please like it and subscribe to my channel. Thank you for watching and I'll see you next time.